For 6 long years, Nikon left its most loyal shooters completely out in the cold. While Sony and Canon fans were feasting on insane AI autofocus and lightning-fast stacked sensors, Nikon users were staring at their aging Z7 Mark II, watching the calendar flip, and feeling the deep sting of rejection. It felt like Nikon gave you absolute crumbs, minor firmware updates while the competition completely stole the spotlight. The silence from Nikon headquarters was deafening, making you feel like a forgotten child. But right now, the crickets have finally stopped chirping. The leaks have officially turned into a massive, unstoppable flood. The Nikon Z7 Mark III is real, it finally has a rumored price tag, and the specs are designed to throw a devastating punch straight at the competition. But we have to ask the ultimate question, is it a little too late? The competition hasn't just been standing in the rain with Nikon. Sony and Canon have been winning by a brutal technical knockout for 2 years straight. Today, we are breaking down every single leak, every internal whisper, and every supply chain secret to see if Nikon is truly making a legendary comeback, or if they are just arriving at a party that ended at midnight. Let's be real for a second, because the timeline here is honestly painful. If you are a Nikon shooter, you have earned the exact right to be a little salty. The original Z7 dropped way back at the start of their full-frame mirrorless journey. It was a bold beginning, but it was plagued by the infamous single-card slot drama. The Z7 Mark II followed in 2020, which fixed the storage issue, but it kept the exact same slow internal soul. Since then, it has been total radio silence for this specific lineup. For 6 long years, Nikon has been completely hyper-focused on the Z8 and the Z9. We get it because those are incredible machines. They are the sports and cinema giants that put Nikon back on the map and proved they could build elite mirrorless tech. But in that process, Nikon seemingly forgot about the exact people who built their reputation in the first place. They forgot the landscape photographers, the studio artists, and the portrait pros who demand ultra-high resolution without needing a massive, bulky sports body. While Nikon was busy perfecting the Z9, Sony released the powerful A7R Mark V and the groundbreaking A7R Mark VI. Canon dropped the R5 and the stunning R5 Mark II. Even Fujifilm managed to update their medium-format monsters twice. Nikon hasn't just been late. They have been dangerously late. But according to the latest supply chain whispers, the painful wait ends in the autumn of 2026. Right now, global retailers are aggressively clearing out old Z7 Mark II stock with massive discounts. This is the clearest sign that the successor is right around the corner. They need to completely flush the warehouses before they can announce the new king. It is a smart business move, but it is a highly frustrating one for the loyal fans who have been holding onto their 2020 gear while the rest of the photography world moved fast into the future. To understand why people are so upset, we have to look closely at how the camera market changed while Nikon was sleeping on this lineup. When the Z7 Mark II launched, it was competing with the Sony A7R Mark IV. That was a fair fight back then. But technology did not stop moving. Sony introduced advanced real-time AI tracking that can predict where a human head is going even if they turn around completely. Canon introduced stacked sensors to their mainstream lineup, giving creators the power to shoot silently at 30 frames per second without any distortion. Nikon shooters had to watch all of this from the sidelines. Every time a major photography trade show happened, Nikon fans hoped for a surprise announcement. Instead, they got firmware updates that slightly improved face detection or added support for new lenses. It felt like watching your favorite sports team refuse to sign any new players while the rest of the league built super teams. This created a massive wave of frustration in online forums, Facebook groups, and YouTube comment sections. Photographers started selling their expensive Nikkor glass at a massive loss just to jump ship to Sony or Canon because they simply could not afford to wait any longer for tools that kept them competitive in the commercial industry. Let's talk about the money, because this is where the Nikon value myth either lives or dies. The rumored price for the Z7 Mark III is currently sitting right between $3,000 and $3,500. For context, the Sony A7 III Mark VI is chilling at $3,500, and the Canon R5 Mark II demands a steep $3,900. If Nikon can actually hit that sweet spot of $3,299, they become the value king overnight. They absolutely need to undercut Sony by at least $200 to convince people to stay in their ecosystem. In a world where inflation has turned mid-range cameras into crazy luxury items, that small price gap is the only thing that will stop a loyal Nikon user from glancing at a Sony catalog. If they push past $3,500, they aren't just in trouble, they will become completely invisible. People do not wait 6 long years just to pay a premium for hardware that feels like a catch-up project. Nikon needs to prove to the world that brand loyalty has a financial reward. They need to show that waiting was a smart business decision for working professionals. Pricing a camera in this economic climate is an incredibly dangerous balancing act. Nikon has to look at their profit margins, but they also have to look at market share. Sony has captured a massive portion of the high-resolution market because they offer options at multiple price points. If Nikon comes out too expensive, they will alienate the independent creators who don't have corporate backing. A working portrait photographer who charges a few $100s per session cannot easily justify a $4,000 camera body alone, especially when you factor in the cost of memory cards, extra batteries, and new lenses. Nikon needs to capture the hearts of these middle-class creators. By offering flagship-level features at a price that feels accessible, they can spark a massive wave of pre-orders that injects much-needed cash into their development departments. If they fail this pricing strategy, the Z7 Mark III will sit on store shelves as a niche item for a dying breed of brand loyalists. Now, let's get right into the guts of this thing, because the leaked specs are where the real story hides. We are looking at a brand new 61-megapixel stacked BSI sensor. Stacked is the absolute magic word here. If you don't know why that matters, listen very closely. The old Z7 sensors were beautiful for stationary subjects, but they were incredibly slow. They had terrible rolling shutter issues that made the electronic shutter almost useless for anything moving faster than a turtle. If you tried to pan across a scene, buildings would bend like jelly. A stacked sensor changes the entire math of the camera. It means lightning-fast readout speeds, zero distortion in your electronic shutter, and a massive boost to autofocus calculations per second. To really understand the magic of a stacked sensor, you have to think about how a normal sensor reads data. A standard backside illuminated sensor reads the image row by row, from top to bottom. This takes time. If something moves across the frame while this row by row reading is happening, it ends up in a different position by the time the bottom rows are read. That is what causes the rolling shutter effect. A stacked sensor attaches a dedicated high-speed memory chip directly to the back of the imaging pixels. This allows the camera to pull data across the entire sensor almost instantly. It unlocks a completely silent shooting experience that is completely free from artifacts. You can shoot a tennis player swinging a racket at maximum speed using only the electronic shutter, and the racket will look perfectly straight instead of bending like a wet noodle. This technology used to be reserved only for $6,000 flagship bodies like the Z9, so seeing it rumored for a camera in the $3,000 range is a massive technological leap forward for everyday photographers. On top of that, you are looking at 8K video at 60p and 4K video at a smooth 120p. This is the exact hybrid powerhouse Nikon should have released 3 years ago. It finally matches the Sony and Canon benchmarks, giving landscape and wildlife pros the slow-motion tools they have been begging for. Think about what this means for a working studio photographer. If you are shooting fashion or high-end commercials, your clients expect instant results. They want sharpness, but they also want speed. The Z7 Mark II forced you to slow down. It made you wait for the buffer to clear. It made you double-check your focus accuracy on every single frame. If the Z7 Mark III fixes this with its stacked sensor, it changes the entire workflow. You can shoot high-speed bursts of an active model without missing a single expression. You can crop into a 61-megapixel file and print a massive billboard without losing a single detail. Wildlife photographers can track a bird diving into water without fear of rolling shutter artifacts tearing the wings apart. This camera has the potential to bridge the gap between extreme resolution and extreme speed. It attempts to be the ultimate weapon for creators who refuse to compromise. The video capabilities here are especially critical because the line between still photography and video production has completely dissolved. Clients no longer hire a photographer just to take photos. They want behind-the-scenes video, high-quality social media clips, and cinematic promotional material all from the same person on the same day. The Z7 Mark II was a frustrating video tool because its autofocus in video mode felt tentative and slow. It would constantly drift into the background, ruining an otherwise perfect shot. With 8K 60p, the Z7 Mark III allows you to shoot wide master shots and crop in significantly during post-production to create close-up angles without losing crisp detail. The inclusion of 4K 120p means you can capture gorgeous, buttery smooth slow motion of fast-moving products or fashion runway walks. This turns the camera from a strict photography tool into a complete production studio that can justify its cost to multimedia agencies. Under the hood, the Z7 Mark III is rumored to jump straight to the EXPEED processor. This is a massive curveball because the flagship Z9 is still running on the older EXPEED 7 architecture. Jumping a full generation ahead means the Z7 Mark III will have way more processing headroom than the most expensive camera Nikon sells today. This new digital brain brings advanced AI-powered autofocus to the table. We are talking about real-time tracking for birds, cars, planes, and even insects that actually stays locked on regardless of the lighting conditions. It is also highly expected to handle in-camera AI noise reduction. Imagine shooting at a high ISO of 6400 in a dark venue and getting a file that looks like it was shot at ISO 400. The processor cleans it up beautifully before the raw data even hits your memory card. High resolution means gigantic files. If you shoot a weekend wedding or a long wildlife trip, you're going to generate terabytes of data. The old Z7 Mark II compressed files slowly, which caused massive pipeline bottlenecks. With the new EXPEED processor inside the Z7 Mark III, file handling is completely redesigned to keep up with the data flood. The body itself is expected to look and feel like a mini Z8. You get that deep professional grip, the illuminated buttons, and all the tactile controls you love, but in a much lighter frame. For the dedicated landscape shooters who hike 10 miles into the wilderness for one perfect sunset shot, every single gram saved is an absolute blessing. Let's talk deeper about this processor upgrade, because it is the actual heart of all these new features. A camera sensor is only as good as the computer brain processing its signals. The EXPEED is rumored to use dedicated neural processing units that handle machine learning tasks separately from the standard image rendering. This means the camera can analyze a scene, identify human anatomy, recognize animal profiles, and predict movement pathways all at the exact same time without dropping its frame rate or overheating. Overheating has been a massive plague for modern hybrid cameras. When you push heavy data loads like 8K video, standard processors get incredibly hot, forcing the camera to shut down to protect its internal circuitry. The advanced manufacturing process of the EXPEED is designed to be highly power efficient and cool running, meaning creators can shoot long events or intense burst sequences without fearing the dreaded temperature warning icon on their screen. But here is the cold, hard truth that most fanboy channels will never tell you. Specs on a piece of paper do not mean a single thing if the real-world execution fails. Nikon has three massive hurdles to clear with this launch. First is the autofocus reliability. Sony is still the undisputed king of sticky autofocus. When a Sony camera locks onto an eye, it acts like it is permanently glued there through trees, fences, and bad lighting. Canon is a very close second place with their dual-pixel tech. Nikon is currently in a respectable third place with the Z8 and Z9, but respectable does not win gold medals in a fierce market. If the Z7 Mark III still hunts for focus in low light or loses a subject behind a single blade of grass, it is an instant deal breaker for wildlife and event pros. Autofocus in the mirrorless era has become the defining metric of a camera's quality. In the old days of DSLRs, photographers were used to using a single center focus point and recomposing their shot. Today, we expect the camera to do the heavy lifting of composition tracking while we focus purely on the timing of the moment. Nikon's early mirrorless attempts suffered from a confusing user interface for subject tracking. You had to press multiple buttons just to initiate subject tracking, and if the subject left the frame for a split second, the camera would completely panic and focus on the background. While the Z8 and Z9 firmware updates fixed a lot of these headaches, the system still requires more user intervention than Sony's seamless point-and-shoot tracking. The Z7 III needs a completely streamlined autofocus workflow that lets a photographer trust the machine completely, allowing them to focus entirely on the emotion of their subject rather than fighting the menu system. If you liked the video, subscribe, share the video, and hit the bell icon.